Admiral Thexvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the massive viewing screen. His blue-scaled hands rested behind his back as he observed his fleet's formation. 12 heavy cruisers moved through space like deadly predators, their dark hulls gleaming under the light of distant suns. The Zephyrian Imperial fleet had ruled the galaxy for 300 years. No species dared to challenge their power. Every world bowed before their advanced technology and superior firepower. Admiral Thexvar had spent 40 years crushing rebellions and expanding the Empire's borders. He knew the taste of victory like an old friend. "Admiral," called his communications officer, a young Zephyrian with bright green eyes. "We are approaching the outer boundary of Sector 7 Alpha. All ships report normal status." Thexvar nodded. This was routine patrol duty along the Empire's edge. Nothing ever happened here. The nearest inhabited world was 6 light-years away, and it housed only a small mining colony. The area was empty except for a few asteroids and gas clouds. "Maintain formation," Thexvar ordered. "Begin standard sensor sweeps." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Blue lights flickered across control panels as the ship's computers analyzed space around them. Everything seemed normal. The Admiral allowed himself to relax slightly. Perhaps this patrol would be as boring as the last dozen. Then something changed. "Admiral," the sensor operator's voice cracked with surprise. "I'm detecting massive spatial distortions directly ahead." "Distance, 50,000 kilometers." Thexvar moved to the sensor station. The display showed swirling energy patterns unlike anything in Imperial databases. Space itself seemed to be twisting and bending in impossible ways. "What kind of distortion?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. The patterns don't match any known phenomena. It looks like—" The operator paused, checking his readings again. "It looks like some kind of hyperspace breach, but the energy signature is completely wrong." Hyperspace travel was old technology. The Empire had mastered phase tunneling centuries ago, allowing instant travel across vast distances. But this distortion looked primitive and violent, like someone had torn a hole in space with brute force. "All ships maintain position," Thexvar commanded. "Raise shields and charge weapons to quarter power." The distortion grew larger and brighter. Energy readings spiked beyond normal levels. Then, with a flash that momentarily blinded their sensors, something emerged from the tear in space. The bridge fell silent. A massive warship hung in the void before them. It was unlike any vessel in Imperial records. Where Zephyrian ships were elegant and curved, this newcomer was angular and brutal. Its hull was dark gray metal covered in strange markings. Weapon systems bristled from every surface like the spines of an angry beast. "Size analysis," Thexvar ordered, his voice steady despite his surprise. "Length, approximately 800 meters. Mass estimated 40,000 tons. Unknown armor composition. I count at least 60 weapon ports of various sizes." The ship's design philosophy was completely alien to Imperial thinking. Zephyrian vessels emphasized grace and efficiency. This thing looked like it was built for one purpose only: war. "Admiral," the communications officer called out. "The unknown vessel is scanning us with active sensors." Thexvar's eyes narrowed. Active scanning was considered an aggressive act under galactic law. No civilized species would dare scan an Imperial fleet without permission. "Return the scan," he ordered. "Full spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about that ship." The results appeared on his screen moments later. The vessel's technology was strange but not primitive. Its power core generated massive amounts of energy. Its hull showed signs of recent battle damage that had been hastily repaired. Most disturbing of all, its weapon systems were powered up and ready to fire. "Sir," the communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." On screen, the main display flickered and showed the interior of an alien bridge. A creature unlike any in Imperial record stared back at them. It was roughly humanoid but shorter than a Zephyrian, with pale skin and strange hair growing from its head. Its eyes were small but intense, filled with a determination that made Thexvar uncomfortable. When the creature spoke, the translation system struggled with its language. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Systems Colonial Ship Retribution. You are in violation of human territorial claims. Withdraw immediately." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Human. No such species existed in Imperial databases. And territorial claims? This sector belonged to the Empire by right of conquest. Thexvar stepped forward. activating his own transmission system. "I am Admiral Thexfar of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. This sector is under Imperial jurisdiction. Identify your species and state your purpose." The human's face remained expressionless. "We are humans from the Sol system. This region is now claimed by the United Systems Colonial Fleet. You have 1 hour to withdraw your forces." Laughter rippled across the bridge. A few junior officers actually smiled at the absurdity of the demand. "An unknown species with a single ship, ordering the Imperial fleet to withdraw? You seem to misunderstand the situation," Thexfar replied. "The Zephyrian Empire controls this entire sector. No species may make territorial claims without Imperial approval. You will submit to boarding and inspection immediately." The human's eyes hardened. "We've run from one enemy already. We won't run from another. This is our final warning, Admiral. Leave now, or we'll make you leave." The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge as the crew processed what they had just heard. A single alien ship was threatening the entire Imperial fleet. It was either madness or supreme confidence. "Admiral," the sensor operator reported, "the alien vessel is moving into an attack formation. All weapons are now fully powered." Thexfar studied the tactical display. The human ship was positioning itself between his fleet and the inner system. Its movements were precise and aggressive, showing no fear despite being outnumbered 12-1. "Analysis of their weapons?" he asked. "Unknown technology, sir. I'm detecting high-energy electromagnetic systems, possibly railguns. Also missile tubes and what appear to be energy weapons of some kind. Their total firepower is considerable." The Admiral made his decision. The Empire had built its reputation on strength and the willingness to use it. No unknown species could be allowed to challenge Imperial authority, especially not with such a small force. "All ships, battle formation Delta 7, he commanded. "We'll give these humans a demonstration of Imperial power. Perhaps they'll be more reasonable after seeing what real warships can do." The 12 Imperial cruisers began moving into position, their weapons charging to full power. Each ship was larger than the human vessel and carried enough firepower to level a city. Together they represented centuries of military advancement and technological superiority. But as Admiral Thexfar watched the human ship on his screen, he noticed something that bothered him. The vessel showed no signs of backing down. Its weapons remained locked on his flagship, and its engines were pushing it forward, not away. Most species, when faced with overwhelming odds, chose retreat or surrender. These humans seemed to be choosing a third option: defiance. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the human vessel is launching objects. Small craft, possibly fighters or missiles." "Defensive fire," Thexfar ordered. "Destroy them before they reach our ships." But as his gunners opened fire, he realized with growing unease that the humans weren't launching an attack. They were deploying sensor buoys throughout the area, mapping his fleet's positions and movements. These creatures weren't just making threats. They were preparing for war. Admiral Thexfar had followed the same first contact protocols for decades. The procedure was simple and effective: show overwhelming force, demonstrate superior technology, and wait for the inevitable surrender. No species had ever refused to submit once they understood the Empire's power. "Cruiser Squadrons Alpha and Beta, move to surround the alien vessel," he commanded. "Gamma Squadron, maintain overwatch position. Charge all weapons to maximum power." 6 Imperial cruisers began their approach, moving in a coordinated pattern that had intimidated countless enemies. Their massive hulls gleamed with energy as shield generators hummed to life. Weapon ports glowed with barely contained power. It was a display designed to inspire fear and submission. The human ship waited. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the approaching Zephyrian vessels from her command chair. Her bridge was smaller than the Admiral's, filled with jury-rigged equipment and battle-scarred consoles. Warning lights flickered across damaged systems that her crew had barely managed to repair. "6 ships moving to surround us," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Chen. "The remaining 6 are holding position at 15,000 kilometers. "Weapon status?" Vasquez asked. "All railgun batteries loaded and charged. Missile tubes 1 through 20 ready to fire. Point defense systems online." Vasquez studied the tactical display. The Zephyrian ships were larger and more advanced than the Retribution, but their movements followed predictable patterns. They relied on their technological advantage and superior numbers. They had never fought an enemy with nothing left to lose. "Ma'am," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission from the enemy flagship. Put it through." Admiral Thexavar's image appeared on the main screen. His blue scales reflected the bridge lighting as he spoke with calm authority. "Human vessel, you are completely surrounded. Our weapons are targeted on your ship. Surrender now and you will be treated according to Imperial law. Resist and you will be destroyed." Vasquez stood slowly. Her uniform was patched and faded, showing signs of the long journey from Earth. But her voice was steady as steel. "Admiral, my people have traveled 10,000 light years to reach this place. We've lost our home, our families, and most of our fleet. What we have left we'll defend with our lives. Last chance to withdraw." "You cannot be serious," Thexvar replied. "You have one ship against my 12. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. This is suicide." "Maybe," Vasquez said, "but it's our choice to make." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Every face on the bridge showed the same expression, grim determination mixed with desperate hope. They had all lost everything once. They wouldn't lose what little remained without a fight. "All hands, battle stations," she announced over the ship's intercom. "Remember what we're fighting for. Remember what we've already lost. Today we show the galaxy that humanity doesn't give up." The Retribution's engines flared to life, pushing the ship forward at a speed that surprised the Zephyrian captains. Instead of trying to escape the encirclement, the human vessel charged directly at the nearest Imperial cruiser. "Admiral," the Zephyrian tactical officer reported, "the human ship is accelerating directly toward the Victorious. Impact in 30 seconds if they maintain course." Thexvar frowned. "They're trying to ram us? Impossible. No captain would sacrifice their ship in a suicide attack." But as he watched, the human vessel continued its charge. At the last moment, it veered to starboard and opened fire. The Retribution's railguns spoke with thunder that could be heard through the ship's hull. Solid tungsten rounds, accelerated to incredible speed, slammed into the Victorious's shields. The Zephyrian energy barriers flared and sparked under the kinetic assault. "Impossible," breathed the Imperial tactical officer. Their shields should have absorbed that energy easily, but the human weapons weren't energy-based. The Empire's shields were designed to deflect plasma bolts and particle beams, not solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rounds punched through the energy barriers like they weren't there. The Victoria shuddered as holes appeared in its hull. Atmosphere vented into space as emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Warning lights flashed across the cruiser's bridge as damage reports flooded in. "Return fire," Admiral Thexvar commanded. "All ships engage the human vessel." The Imperial fleet responded with devastating firepower. Plasma cannons and particle beams lanced out toward the Retribution. But Captain Vasquez had already moved her ship using the burning Victorious as cover while her gunners reloaded. "Target the second cruiser," she ordered. "Hit them before they can reposition." The Retribution's missiles launched in a coordinated barrage. Unlike the guided projectiles the Zephyrians expected, these were simple kinetic killers. Chunks of metal with basic guidance systems and massive warheads. They moved too fast for the Imperial point defense systems to stop them all. The cruiser Dominance took 3 direct hits. Its elegant hull cracked open like an egg, spilling debris and bodies into the void. The ship's reactor went critical, adding nuclear fire to the destruction. On the Imperial flagship, Admiral Thexvar stared at his tactical display in shock. 2 of his cruisers had been crippled or destroyed in less than 3 minutes. The human ship had taken damage from return fire, but it continued fighting with no apparent concern for its own safety. "Sir," his communications officer said, "Captain Tvek of the Relentless is requesting permission to withdraw. His ship has taken severe damage and he's lost life support on 3 decks." Thexvar watched the human vessel execute another impossible maneuver, spinning on its axis while firing at a 3rd Imperial cruiser. The alien captain was using tactics that no civilized species would attempt, moves that risked destroying her own ship just to get a better firing angle. "Granted," he said finally. "All ships fall back to maximum weapon range. Maintain fire but avoid close combat." The surviving Imperial vessels began withdrawing, their elegant formations disrupted by the savage human assault. The Retribution pursued for several minutes before breaking off, returning to its position near the system's edge. Captain Vasquez collapsed into her command chair, breathing heavily. Her ship had taken significant damage, hull breaches on 4 decks, 2 railgun batteries destroyed, and 30% of her crew dead or wounded. But they had survived. "Damage report," she called out. "We're hurt but functional," Lieutenant Commander Chen replied. "Engines at 80%, weapons at 70%. We can fight again if we have to." On the main screen, the Imperial fleet held position at long range. Several ships were clearly damaged, trailing debris in atmosphere. The mighty Zephyrian Empire had just been bloodied by a single human warship. "Ma'am," the communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the Imperial flagship." Admiral Thexvar's image appeared again, but his calm confidence had been replaced by wary respect. "Human captain, you have proven your courage. But this cannot continue. More ships will come. You cannot fight the entire Imperial Navy." Vasquez wiped blood from a cut on her forehead and met his gaze. "Admiral, we've already fought one impossible war. We lost our homeworld to an enemy that devoured planets like snacks. Most of us died in that fight. Those of us who remain, we're not afraid of dying. We're afraid of giving up." She leaned forward in her chair. "You can bring 1,000 ships if you want. We'll fight them all, because this is our last stand, and we're going to make it count." The transmission ended, leaving Thexvar alone with his thoughts and the wreckage of his assumptions about human capabilities. The Imperial Command Center on Zephyr Prime buzzed with activity as Admiral Thexvar's report reached the highest levels of government. Supreme Commander Kelthera, a tall Zephyrian with silver scales that marked her advanced age, read the battle summary 3 times before believing it. 2 cruisers destroyed, 1 heavily damaged by a single alien vessel, she said to her aide. "This must be some kind of mistake. The sensor logs confirm it, Supreme Commander. The alien ship used primitive kinetic weapons that somehow penetrated our shield technology. Admiral Thexvar requests immediate reinforcements." Kelthera walked to the massive window overlooking the Imperial capital. Below her, millions of beings from dozens of conquered species went about their daily lives under Zephyrian rule. The Empire had brought peace and order to the galaxy through superior technology and unwavering strength. What do we know about these humans? Very little, Supreme Commander. They claim to be from something called the Sol system, which doesn't appear in our star charts. Their technology is different from ours, but not necessarily inferior. And they seem to have no fear of death. Kelthera had ruled the Empire for 50 years. She had seen rebellions rise and fall, watched entire species kneel before imperial might. But something about this report troubled her. No species fought like these humans had described, willing to sacrifice everything for a small patch of empty space. Send a message to Admiral Thexvar, she decided. Tell him to offer the humans a chance to surrender. Full imperial protection, colony rights on an uninhabited world, integration into our society, standard terms for a new species. Meanwhile, in the disputed system, Captain Vasquez worked to repair her ship and prepare for what she knew was coming. The Retribution hung in space near a small asteroid field, using the rocks as cover while her crew patched hull breaches and replaced damaged systems. "Captain," Chief Engineer Rodriguez called over the intercom, "I've got the number 3 railgun battery back online, but we're down to 60% ammunition for the main guns. How long until we can move?" Vasquez asked. "Another 6 hours for basic repairs. 12 if you want the ship combat ready." Vasquez nodded and moved to the communications station. She had been working on a message to the Zephyrian Empire, hoping to make them understand what they were dealing with. Maybe if she could explain humanity's situation, they might avoid more bloodshed. "Broadcast on all frequencies," she ordered. "Full translation protocols." The message began with technical data about humanity's origins. Earth, the cradle of human civilization, located in a small spiral arm of the galaxy. A world of blue oceans and green continents, home to 8 billion people who had just begun reaching for the stars. Then came the tragedy. The Devourers, an extragalactic species that consumed entire worlds, stripping them of all organic matter before moving on. They had appeared without warning in Earth's solar system, their massive bioships blotting out the sun. Vasquez's voice remained steady as she described the desperate evacuation. 12 colony ships carrying 2 million survivors, all that remained of human civilization. The sacrificial rearguard that died holding off the Devourers while the civilians escaped. The long journey through dark space hoping to find a new home. "We ask for very little," she concluded. "One small system where we can rebuild. We have no interest in conquest or expansion. We simply want to survive." But if threatened, we will fight with everything we have. We've already lost everything once. We won't lose what little remains without making our enemies pay dearly for it. The transmission reached the Imperial fleet 30 minutes later. Admiral Thexvar listened to the entire message, his expression growing more thoughtful with each passing minute. When it ended, he sat in silence for a long time. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving new orders from Imperial Command." The orders were clear: offer the humans standard terms for peaceful integration into the Empire. If they refused, wait for reinforcements before engaging again. The Empire wanted this situation resolved quickly and quietly. Thexvar composed his response carefully. He had spent his career crushing rebellions, but those had been fights against subjects who wanted freedom from Imperial rule. This was different. These humans had never been conquered. They were simply trying to survive. "Captain Vasquez," he began, "I have listened to your message and I understand your situation. The Zephyrian Empire offers you protection and assistance. We can provide you with a suitable world for colonization, resources to rebuild your civilization, and guaranteed autonomy within Imperial space. All we ask in return is recognition of Imperial authority and adherence to galactic law." The offer was generous by Imperial standards. Most new species were given much less favorable terms. But Thexvar had seen how these humans fought, and he suspected they would reject any deal that required submission. Captain Vasquez received the transmission while supervising repairs to the ship's missile tubes. She read the terms twice before calling her senior officers together. "They're offering us a world," she announced. "Full colonization rights, resources, protection. The catch is we'd become a client species under Imperial rule." Lieutenant Commander Chen spoke first. "It's not a bad offer, Captain. We could rebuild, maybe even thrive under their protection." "Under their control," corrected Commander Sarah Kim, the ship's executive officer. "We'd be trading one master for another." "We fled Earth to escape extinction," Chief Engineer Rodriguez added. "But we also fled to be free, to build something new without anyone telling us how to live." Vasquez looked at each of her officers. These were people who had lost everything: homes, families, their entire world. They had followed her across 10,000 light-years of empty space because they believed in the dream of human independence. "The Empire means well," she said finally, "but we didn't come this far to become someone else's subjects. We came to be free." She composed her reply to Admiral Thexvar with heavy heart, knowing it meant more fighting and more death. "Admiral, we appreciate your offer, but we must decline. Humanity has always chosen freedom over safety. We're not asking for much, just the right to exist as an independent species. If the Empire cannot accept this, then we'll fight for it." The message reached the Imperial fleet at the same time as Supreme Commander Kelthera's response to the human broadcast. Her words were cold and final. "Admiral Thexvar, these humans refuse to accept the natural order of galactic civilization. No species may claim independence without Imperial approval. The 43rd Fleet is being dispatched to your location with orders to resolve this situation permanently. Estimated arrival: 48 hours. Admiral Thexvar stared at the message, feeling something he hadn't experienced in decades: doubt. The 43rd Fleet contained 50 ships, including 3 massive dreadnoughts. It was enough firepower to sterilize a planet. But as he looked at the human ship on his screen, still making repairs while preparing for another battle, he wondered if the Empire truly understood what they were about to face. These humans weren't rebels or criminals. They were survivors fighting for the right to exist, and survivors, he was beginning to realize, were the most dangerous enemies of all. Supreme Commander Kelthera stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Absolute Authority, watching her massive fleet prepare for battle. 47 ships moved through space in perfect formation: heavy cruisers, battle destroyers, and 3 mighty dreadnoughts that had never known defeat. "Fleet status report," she commanded. "All ships ready for combat." "Supreme Commander," replied Fleet Admiral Zextai. "Long-range sensors show the human vessel still in the outer system. Admiral Thexvar's remaining ships are maintaining watch at a safe distance." Kelthera studied the tactical display. One alien ship against the pride of the Imperial Navy. It should have been a simple execution, but Admiral Thexvar's reports had made her cautious. These humans fought unlike any enemy the Empire had faced. "What's our intelligence on their capabilities?" "Limited, Supreme Commander. They use kinetic weapons that can penetrate our standard shields. Their tactics are unconventional. They seem willing to sacrifice their ships to achieve tactical advantages. Through the viewing screen, Kelthara could see the target system growing larger. In 48 hours, she would demonstrate to the galaxy what happened to species that defied the Empire. This would be remembered as the day Imperial dominance was reaffirmed. But unknown to the approaching fleet, the humans had not been idle. Captain Vasquez stood in the Retribution's cargo bay watching her crew make final preparations. The bay that once held supplies for colonists now served as a war room, filled with tactical displays and communication. "Equipment, status report," she called. "Out. All platforms deployed and operational," reported Lieutenant Commander Chen. "The Vengeance and Last Stand report ready for action." Vasquez smiled grimly. The 48 hours had been well used. 2 more human warships had arrived through the crude hyperspace rift, the last survivors of Battle Group 7, which had been holding off Devourer scouts near the Centauri system. Captain Jackson of the Vengeance was a grizzled veteran who had lost his left arm in the Battle of Europa. Captain Santos of the Last Stand was younger, but had earned her command by leading the successful evacuation of Mars Colony. Together, they represented the last military commanders of the human race. More importantly, the human fleet had spent every hour preparing the system for defense. Using their ship's fabrication systems and materials salvaged from asteroids, they had built a network of orbital platforms throughout the region. Each platform mounted railgun batteries and missile pods, turning empty space into a deadly maze. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Thexvar," the communications officer announced. Thexvar's image appeared on the main screen. The Zephyrian admiral looked tired and troubled. "Captain Vasquez, I must warn you that a massive Imperial fleet approaches this system. Supreme Commander Kelthara leads the force personally. This is not a patrol or punitive expedition. This is the full might of the Empire coming to end your resistance." "How many ships?" Vasquez asked. 47 vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts. Each dreadnought alone carries more firepower than my entire original fleet." Vasquez nodded calmly. "Thank you for the warning, Admiral. Will you be participating in the attack?" Thexvar hesitated. "I have my orders. But Captain, what you're attempting is impossible. No force in galactic history has stood against an Imperial dreadnought fleet and survived." "There's a first time for everything," Vasquez replied. "Tell me, Admiral, do you have children?" The unexpected question caught Thexvar off guard. "Yes, 2 daughters. Then you understand why we fight. This isn't about military victory or political independence. This is about the right of our children to exist. Every human child who might be born in the future, that's what we're defending." The transmission ended, leaving Thexvar alone with his thoughts as the Imperial fleet entered the system. The battle began with Supreme Commander Kelthara's standard overwhelming assault doctrine. The Imperial fleet advanced in 3 waves, dreadnoughts leading with cruisers and destroyers providing support. It was a formation that had conquered 100 worlds. "Begin bombardment," Kelthara ordered. "Target the primary human vessel." The dreadnought Absolute Authority opened fire with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Massive energy beams lanced across space toward the Retribution's position, but the human ship wasn't there anymore. "Sir, the target has moved," reported the tactical officer. "They're using the asteroid field for cover." "Impossible. Our sensors should track any ship movement." But the humans had learned from their first engagement. They had deployed sensor scramblers throughout the system, creating false readings and hiding their ship's movements. The Imperial targeting systems, designed for conventional warfare, struggled to lock onto enemies that refused to fight conventionally. The Vengeance struck first, emerging from behind a large asteroid to fire a full missile barrage at the cruiser squadron on the fleet's right flank. The kinetic warheads punched through shields and armor, crippling 2 ships before they could respond. "Deploy fighter squadrons," Kelthara commanded. "Clear those asteroids and find me those human ships." Imperial fighters swarmed into the asteroid field, their pilots confident in their superior technology. But the humans had turned the entire region into a trap. Hidden weapon platforms activated as the fighters passed, filling space with railgun fire and explosive charges. Squadron after squadron of Imperial fighters died in the asteroid maze. Their energy shields, designed to deflect other energy weapons, offered no protection against solid projectiles and proximity mines. Captain Santos aboard the last stand watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Platform 7 reports 20 confirmed kills. Platform 12 is down, but they took out a destroyer before dying. The human defense network was working exactly as planned. Instead of fighting a direct battle against superior numbers, they had turned the entire system into a weapon. Every asteroid hid surprises, every debris field concealed threats. But the Empire's response was swift and brutal. The dreadnought Infinite Glory began systematically destroying asteroids with massive energy blasts, clearing the field of cover. The humans were forced to move their ships into open space. All ships, execute Pattern Delta, Captain Vasquez ordered over the fleet communication channel. The 3 human warships burst from cover simultaneously, approaching the Imperial fleet from different angles. But instead of engaging the dreadnoughts directly, they targeted the support vessels, cruisers and destroyers that provided the fleet's defensive screen. The Retribution dove beneath the Imperial formation, its railguns hammering the underside of a heavy cruiser. The ship's hull split open, spilling atmosphere and debris. Before the escorts could respond, Vasquez had already moved to her next target. Captain Jackson's Vengeance performed a maneuver that made Imperial commanders gasp in horror. His ship accelerated directly toward the dreadnought Absolute Authority, firing every weapon while his engines pushed the ship far beyond safe operating limits. "He's going to ram us," shouted Kelthera's tactical officer. But at the last possible moment, Jackson's ship veered away, passing so close to the dreadnought's hull that the 2 vessels nearly touched. As it passed, the Vengeance released a spread of boarding pods that attached to the Imperial ship's armor like parasites. Boarding parties? Kelthera couldn't believe what she was seeing. No one attempts to board a dreadnought, but human Marines were already cutting through the Absolute Authority's hull, carrying explosives and determination in equal measure. They had no hope of capturing the massive ship, but they could cause significant damage to its internal systems. The Imperial fleet's formation began to break down as captains struggled to adapt to human tactics. These aliens fought like madmen, using strategies that risked their own destruction just to inflict damage on their enemies. Supreme Commander, Kelthera realized with growing alarm that her overwhelming advantage in ships and firepower meant nothing if her enemies refused to fight by the established rules of warfare. The turning point came when Captain Vasquez made a decision that would be remembered in both human and Zephyrian history. Her ship, the Retribution, had taken severe damage from concentrated fire. Half her weapons were gone, her engines were failing, and life support was critical. But she still had one card to play. "All hands abandon ship," she announced over the intercom. "Emergency pods to minimum safe distance. Set the antimatter containment for manual detonation." Her crew obeyed without question, launching escape pods toward the waiting human ships. Vasquez remained on the bridge with just her core officers, guiding the dying ship toward the center of the Imperial fleet. "Captain," Admiral Thexvar's voice came over an emergency channel. "What are you doing?" "What we have to do," Vasquez replied. "Tell your Supreme Commander that humans keep their promises. We said we'd make you pay for every inch of space." The Retribution, burning and broken, limped into the heart of the Imperial formation. Kelthera's ships fired desperately, but the human vessel pressed forward until it was locked in a final embrace with the dreadnought Eternal Dominion. Captain Vasquez's last transmission was heard across both fleets. For Earth, for the future, for humanity. The antimatter explosion that followed lit up the entire system. The Eternal Dominion vanished in nuclear fire, along with 3 nearby cruisers. News of the Imperial fleet's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 100 worlds, conquered species whispered in amazement about the unknown humans who had destroyed a dreadnought with a single ship. In the farthest reaches of Imperial space, rebellions that had smoldered for decades suddenly flared to life. Supreme Commander Kelthera stood in her private quarters aboard the Absolute Authority, staring at casualty reports that seemed impossible. 17 ships destroyed or crippled, nearly 40,000 Imperial personnel dead, 1 dreadnought completely annihilated, all inflicted by 3 alien vessels whose crews couldn't have numbered more than 3,000. Her aide, a nervous young Zephyrian named Velkar, delivered the latest intelligence reports with trembling hands. "Supreme Commander, we're receiving rebellion alerts from 12 systems. The Carathian Republic has declared independence. 3 client species have refused to honor their tribute obligations." Kelthera nodded slowly. She had feared this would happen. The Empire's power rested not just on military might, but on the belief that Imperial forces were invincible. The humans had shattered that belief in a single battle. What's the status of the surviving human ship? The vessel designated Last Stand has withdrawn to the inner system. They're maintaining defensive positions around the fourth planet. Our long-range sensors show significant damage, but the ship appears operational. Kelthera walked to her window, looking out at the stars that had once seemed firmly under Imperial control. Everything was changing, and she had to decide whether to change with it or risk losing everything. In the disputed system, Captain Maria Santos worked frantically to keep her ship operational. The Last Stand had taken severe damage in the final engagement. Hull breaches on 6 decks, main engines operating at 30%, and half her weapons destroyed. Worse, she had only 400 crew members left from the original complement of 800. Captain, Chief Engineer Patel called over the intercom. I've managed to restore life support to sections 7 through 12. But we're running on emergency power only. Santos rubbed her tired eyes. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, coordinating repairs while monitoring Imperial fleet movements. The enemy ships maintained their distance, clearly unwilling to risk another close engagement. Ma'am, her communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the Imperial flagship. It's addressed to you personally. Santos straightened her uniform and walked to the main screen. Supreme Commander Kelthara's image appeared, but the Zephyrian leader looked different from the confident military commander who had arrived with overwhelming force. There was something in her eyes that might have been respect. Captain Santos, I am Supreme Commander Kelthara of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. I request permission to meet with you under a flag of truce. The request surprised everyone on the human bridge. In 3 centuries of expansion, the Empire had never requested negotiations with an unconquered enemy. What do you propose to discuss? Santos asked carefully. The future, Kelthara replied, for both our species. 2 hours later, a single Imperial shuttle approached the Last Stand under escort. Captain Santos had agreed to the meeting despite the protests of her senior officers. They met in the ship's damaged conference room, surrounded by the scars of recent battle. Kelthara entered wearing simple military dress rather than the elaborate ceremonial armor typical of Imperial commanders. She was tall even by Zephyrian standards, with silver scales that caught the light as she moved. But it was her eyes that impressed Santos, ancient, intelligent, and filled with the weight of command. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Kelthara said as she took the offered seat. I wanted to speak with you before making decisions that will affect both our peoples. I'm listening, Santos replied. Kelthara gestured toward the damaged walls around them. Captain Vasquez was a remarkable leader. In 3 centuries, no enemy has ever destroyed an Imperial dreadnought. Her sacrifice will be remembered long after both of us are gone. She died protecting her people, Santos said simply. That's what we do. Yes, I'm beginning to understand that. Kelthara leaned forward. Captain, I could bring more fleets here. The Empire has thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. Eventually, we could overwhelm your defenses through sheer numbers. Yes, you could, Santos agreed. But it would cost you dearly, and word would spread that the mighty Empire needed 1,000 ships to defeat the last human survivors. How many more rebellions would that inspire? Kelthara smiled slightly. You understand politics as well as warfare. Yes, the Empire faces challenges because of this battle. Your people have proven that we are not invincible. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But there is another possibility. What if instead of destroying each other, we chose a different path? You're talking about surrender terms again? No, Kelthara said firmly. I'm talking about recognition. Official Imperial recognition of human sovereignty over this system. A formal peace treaty between equals. Santos stared at her in shock. The Empire doesn't make treaties with unconquered species. The Empire has never faced a species like humanity, Kelthara replied. You've shown us something we thought impossible, that inferior numbers and technology can triumph through sheer determination and tactical innovation. Perhaps it's time for the Empire to learn from its enemies rather than simply destroying them. The Zephyrian commander stood and walked to the damaged viewport, looking out at the stars beyond. The galaxy is changing, Captain. Species that have served the Empire for centuries are beginning to question our authority. They're asking why they should bow to rulers who can be defeated by a handful of alien ships. She turned back to Santos. I can offer you what your Captain Vasquez died for, independence and security for your people. In exchange, I ask for a formal alliance. Not submission, but partnership. Your tactical knowledge could help us adapt to new threats, while our resources could help you rebuild your civilization. Santos considered the offer carefully. It was more than any human had dared hope for when they first arrived in this system, but it also meant trusting an empire that had conquered half the galaxy. What guarantees would we have? She asked. My word, Kelthera said simply, and the knowledge that the empire needs allies more than subjects. The galaxy is entering a new age, Captain. We can either adapt together or fall separately. Santos made her decision with the weight of human survival on her shoulders. I'll need to consult with my crew and the civilian leadership of our colony ships, but in principle, yes, humanity accepts your proposal. Kelthera smiled, the first genuine expression Santos had seen from her. Then let us write a new chapter in galactic history. 3 months later, the Treaty of Kepler Station was signed in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in Imperial history, a non-Zephyrian species was granted full sovereignty over their territory. The human system became an independent state under Imperial protection, with guarantees of non-interference and mutual defense. Captain Santos, now Admiral Santos of the reformed human colonial fleet, stood beside Supreme Commander Kelthara as they watched human and Zephyrian engineers working together to build new defensive platforms. The two species, so different in appearance and culture, had found common ground and mutual respect. Do you think it will work? Santos asked the alliance. Yes, I believe it will, Kelthera replied. Your people have taught the Empire a valuable lesson. That strength comes not from the size of your fleet, but from the courage of those who crew it. She gestured toward the construction work proceeding around them. Besides, the galaxy faces new threats beyond our borders. The Devourer scouts your people reported are still out there. When they come, we'll need every advantage we can get. Santos nodded, thinking of Captain Vasquez and all the others who had died to bring humanity to this moment. They had kept their promise. They had found a place where humanity could survive and grow. But more than that, they had earned something even more precious. Respect. The human warship had emerged from nowhere and changed everything. The Galactic Empire, unprepared for such determination and sacrifice, had learned that even the mightiest powers must adapt or fall. And in adapting, they had found not just a new ally, but a new understanding of what true strength meant. In the years that followed, as new threats emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies, the alliance between humanity and the Empire would prove to be the foundation of galactic defense. The desperate survivors who had lost everything had not only found a new home, they had helped forge a new future for all the stars. The age of unchallenged Imperial dominance was over. The age of cooperation and shared strength had begun, and at its heart stood a simple truth that Captain Elena Vasquez had died to prove. That courage and determination could triumph over any odds. No matter how impossible they seemed, the galaxy would never be the same.